I think gone are the days where you had a job or a career for the same company for 30, 40 years. That's not the way the world kind of works anymore. If you sort of think you're reaching the end of your season there, then maybe there's a path or a plan for you to kind of think about, okay, how do I kind of change paths here? And it is empowering. So I think those are all pros. If you can kind of wrap your mind around that identity shift, you definitely can do it.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a different career and chose to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we're so pleased to have JP Albano with us. JP, welcome.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, JP, again, for being on the Road Less Traveled Show. To start with, you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what original path you started down and how long you're in that line of work.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I was an IT guy for many years. I mean, I got early on, I got sucked into video games, not to go back to when I was 8 years old sort of thing, but that was really what set me down a path of technology, and it sort of came naturally to me. So I was a systems guy. I became an engineer for many years. And then I found myself doing pre-sales engineering. And then ultimately one day I made the switch to tech sales. And I was talking about, overcoming a lot of limiting beliefs around that. But that was about, I think 8 or 9, 10 years ago or so. And I haven't looked back. That was a tremendous step up for me in quality of life and just getting to the next level of getting into tech sales. And I was doing that for close to 13 years now, all into the same company here. But yeah, tech sales was my background. And I think it helped me. Spoiler alert, it helped me definitely in my real estate career for a variety of reasons.
Nice. Great. And then what have you transitioned to, as you mentioned, the real estate career? How did you get into real estate, and then what kind of avenues have you gone down in that genre?
Yeah, sure. Well, quick backstory on that is in tech sales, I had the great fortune for doing well at it, right? It just sort of came naturally to me, and I found myself in receiving end of purchase orders, which is a great place to be when you're in sales.
Mm-hmm. JP, sorry, is it services or is it a product?
Sure, yeah, I'll go into background. So I worked as a what's called a VAR, a value-added reseller. So we worked as a company like a middleman, essentially. And I'd have my end user clients. These are enterprise organizations, and we would recommend solutions. Hey, you're looking to build a giant archive system. Let me recommend Dell or HP or whatever the right fit was. So I'd bring in the manufacturer salespeople and say, hey, I've got a great deal over here at XYZ Corporation, and I would help essentially broker the deal. But we had some additional value because we saved them time. That's basically the
nice.
Place. Okay. Being very successful in sales is wonderful. It creates a problem, though, where when you start receiving larger commission checks, and don't get me wrong, these are awesome problems to have, but more and more of your commission check goes away in taxes. And after a few years of doing this and kind of realizing the path here, I kind of felt like, man, there's got to be a better way of saving some money on taxes. And I sort of discovered real estate. And as you all know, there's 1,000,001 different ways to kind of get involved in real estate. At the time, for me, and spending a lot of time researching and reading and just absorbing, where in the real estate world do I find myself? Multifamily made a lot of sense to me. I think I found one of Dave Lindahl's books, and I read that from front to cover in one session. And for me, it just rock solid, made 100% sense. So I made a decision. I'm going to go down the multifamily path. I think early on I was going to be a passive investor, and I'm anything but. I'm far from passive today in investment world, but that was the path. Multifamily just made a lot of sense to me, and I went full in, head first.
Yes. And how did that unfold then, JP? I mean, going from the mindset, and I think probably a lot of us had that. You understand the numbers make sense with multifamily, and you maybe I'll do passive, or maybe I'll buy myself, an 8 or a 12plex or something like that for some cash flow. How did that transition your initial thinking and how you ended up doing assume syndication today is where you're going with this?
Yeah, the first thing I needed to do, because I'm definitely an analytical mind person, is I need to understand, so learn as much as I could, and I was absorbing as much information as I could, and get to a point where you kind of don't know what you don't know, which is the same for any person or any industry. I got involved in an educational group. The group originally was Jake and Gino, and I think that's actually how we met you guys back a number of years ago. And that was great because it gave me a supportive community and the support and the information and the tools for me to kind of get into my first deal. The first deal that I ended up doing was a 28 unit in Houston, Texas. It wasn't through Jake and Gino, but it was through kind of another group. They kind of put me and three other sponsors together, three complete strangers, for an off-market deal. We bought this thing for $2 million and we syndicated our first deal. So we did a lot of things that are actually really hard for your first deal. Syndication, three strangers, remote state, all those things. But we actually made it work. And what I kind of found out for the guys is that after we exited the deal, we were the only group that they were able to kind of put together magically that were able to not only close the deal, but also like exit. So that was wonderful stuff. But doing that 28 unit was my first taste into this. And I realized in doing that and kind of getting exposed to some of the property management aspects of it, the asset management pieces of it, I wanted to do more of that. And I found a lot of, I'm not gonna say comfort. I just found that real estate for me opened up a new world, and being in sales for a long time, sales is hard, right? Even when you're not, like, my approach was never really was selling to clients. But in the place that I sat, meaning of reseller, right? A middleman, I felt like I was always proving my worth and trying to claw for my seat at the table, whether it's in between the customer and the manufacturer salespeople. And I kind of got tired in dealing with a lot of the egos with the vendor reps, and some of the clients are a bit ornery. And so when I got into real estate, I was so overwhelmed positively by how welcoming people were for partnering and working together and collaborating and let's do this together. Let's grow together. And that was not really, you get an element of that in sales, especially with the manufacturer reps, like, hey, we did good at this account, let's go find other ones. That's fine. But then you still have this uphill battle with clients where you're always trying to get through their door. And I just felt like it was more life-giving than life-taking, which was my experience for 13 years in sales or so. So it just was reinvigorating for me, I guess is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Nice. And a quick question on that. Since the three of you that did the initial deal together were so successful with it, did any of those relationships continue as you did other deals together?
Yeah. So all the three guys, they're all great guys. They're spattered or scattered all across the U.S. One of them, Dan, he actually went out to work for like a private equity group. Rory out in Carolinas, he's doing a bunch of rental properties. And then Stefan, I just got a chance to reconnect with him. It's funny, I met him once when we did our property tour. We never met in person again, but we reconnected just a few weeks ago in Houston. I was looking at a deal there, and it's like lifelong friends. And I actually invited him to be on a podcast that I recently started because he had a really amazing story of kind of not rags to riches, but like great success, all taken away, and then kind of coming from building from the ashes again. But everyone has kind of really took that opportunity, that first deal that we had, and done more in the real estate space. They just use it as a springboard to get to the next thing. And a common thing for a lot of new people when they're getting into real estate is this idea that just get your first deal. And I know back in the beginning, it took about 2 years of just education and just surrounding myself before the day comes where you get your first deal. And it seems like a big accomplishment, right? And then once that comes, really the next deals, they do get easier. They get easier. They come more natural, and you start to build relationships and partnerships with other people that you resonate with.
That's
great. Yeah.
JP, look back to your sales days, maybe your pre-sales days. Is there a funny story you can share that something happened to you along the way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So getting into sales. So I was an engineer, right? So my job as an engineer was I was the guy after it was sold. I went in, you would parachute me in, and I would do the installation. And, so getting into pre-sales was a new thing. I was a little nervous. I remember my boss, Lior, Israeli tank commander. He said, listen, I need you to go in for this pre-sales role here. And I need you to do the following. Just close your mouth and just listen. Like, you can ask a couple questions and just listen. And so I think I retained that with me. That isn't the funny story, but I'm getting into the funny story. Retained that with me in my sales career when I got into it. So when I was actually a sales rep, we were working with a client on things, and I think I was kind of new in the company, maybe like a year or so into it. And I made the ultimate mistake as a reseller, right? Because remember, I'm buying things for a cost. I have a cost of goods, and I'm selling it to my end user, my customer, for a margin, for a profit. I'm taking my cost, I'm adding whatever, 5 points, 10 points onto it, and selling it to the customer. Well, on an email thread, I got a little too ambitious, and I actually shared my cost in basically my entire quote on an email thread with a client, and my manager made me aware of it. And like the feeling of doom that you get when you realize the colossal mistake that you made, because it could damage the relationship with the client. The whole host of things could go wrong. And it was definitely, an oh poop moment, right? Thankfully, my saving grace from that very valuable lesson was that the email thread was just like so long, super long. And I think what I did was I just replied back a bunch of times with nonsense to make it mask like it was an email mistake. And it sort of went by like a ship in the night and nobody knew any different. But I totally thought it was a really big bullet. And that was a scary moment. Looking back, it was sort of funny, but definitely could have been a BFD, a brief freaking deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm sure they understand, the end client understands that you
got to make some money.
You're going to make some money in there somewhere, but at some point in time, you're right. You don't want to play the cards and reveal behind the curtain. Yeah.
Kimono being open, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Yikes. Glad it turned out okay.
Yeah. And this may tie into this next question then. JP, what was a kind of a deciding factor to make you get in real estate? Was it once you thought you had no job after the email, or?
That was a few years prior to that.
All right.
I think it was just, it was a culmination of things in being in sales for a long time. I feel like, and as I've gotten older, I feel like I get a little more wiser, and you just sort of realize everything has a season. Right. And, at a certain point in your life, this thing is your focus and your priority, and you work towards that goal, and then you're doing it, you're achieving success. And then, I'm 41 now. At the time, it was mid-30s. I guess I was kind of ripe for that point where I was ready for another transition to something else. And it started with this want to save on taxes. I was paying too much in taxes, and sort of realizing some of the ancillary benefits that multifamily make a lot of sense. Being able to create passive income, and that idea, like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, wouldn't it be great to kind of scale down my day-to-day trading time for money workload and allow for more passive income to come in? And so that kind of painted a picture for me, like there's this alternative universe out there where I can take what I've learned and do something a little different and allow me that freedom. And that's what I think was so inspiring for me when I discovered real estate, specifically multifamily real estate. And it's one of the reasons why I've been inspired recently to kind of go back into my Rolodex, into all of my fellow tech sales brethren and sisters, and actually help them kind of create a blueprint for how they can maybe one day escape the rat race in tech sales and kind of create a path forward in financial freedom. So that's sort of a chapter of my life there.
That's great. Cool. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah. Good deal. So JP, as you were really starting to kind of ramp up you had a tax reason to go toward real estate, great. Makes sense. Obviously, it's something you enjoy and you found a passion for, it sounds like, but initially were there some, you mentioned education, you took a very strong position that you want to be smart about it. And we certainly support and agree with that. But were there some obstacles that you could talk about initially?
Oh man, I feel like, and I have to imagine this is common for any other adult that's making a transition to a different career, right? For me, some of the biggest things were so many, what I would look back now as silly, limiting beliefs, like almost debilitating limiting beliefs. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a hang up at the time about reaching out to brokers for deal information. Like, I had this thing in my mind where I call the broker, and if I don't sound like I'm sophisticated or I'm not a noob, like, they're not going to want to talk to me, or they're not going to give me access to deals. I mean, I was so naive about things, but like in my mind, my ego was kind of creating this thing to protect me. Like, hey, you got to be careful. Like, this is a big deal, talking to brokers, and then a hang up about raising capital from people, right? Obviously strangers, but friends and family, and like having a shift in mindset around, like, you're not just like getting money from them. You're creating an opportunity for wealth creation for them to better their life. That took a few years to kind of get through, but there was a lot of this limiting belief stuff of changing my identity. And I had to change my identity from IT nerd, right, to real estate investor, to someone that helps people kind of create financial freedom. It's just these little, and it gets easier over time because you become self-aware of those things. But at the time, in the moment, that was some hard stuff that I felt like I was wrestling with.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it is a big mindset shift. And again, I would have to say those limiting beliefs were something I had to overcome as well. Some of those, and, probably others as well. But at the same point in time, the concept of, bugging people to sell, you're not. I heard something along the way somewhere that basically said, you're the prize. You're the gem. You're bringing a great opportunity to somebody to see if they want to take advantage of it. They can say yes, they can say no, but at the same point in time, it's not you pushing something on somebody. You're bringing an opportunity, and hopefully they recognize it as the gem, as the prize that it really is, because it can be huge.
You can, and I think you hit a nail on the head with that. And I think for me, for my book of business, I would say there's a good handful of my clients that are just those. Like, they're really easy to work with, and they understand the value that I bring. Some others, they don't see me in that way. And I think just from maybe growing up with some lack mentality mindset stuff, just realizing like, oh, I need to hold on to these sort of things, right? These clients, and kind of do whatever it takes to kind of get sales done, and not realizing like, maybe it's time to let those things go and allow for space for other clients that I know exist, right? They are out there because I have them that value the relationship, and they value the value that we bring to the table for them. But I think at the point, it just got to a point where I was just like, all right, cool. I kind of mentally checked out a little bit. Let's find, some joy in the next season for myself. But you're absolutely right, Richard.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a transactional thing, right? Like, you're going door to door. It's like vacuum cleaners, and you leave, you sold $1,000 vacuum cleaner.
Long-term relationship.
Exactly. They're upset. Like, why'd I spend the money on that? And, it's a high pressure thing. It's your help building wealth. It's alignment of interest. Like you said, it's always the long game. You're not one sale. You want people to be happy and repeat, be able to interact and benefit from your opportunities for a long time in the future.
That's right.
That's
right.
Well, JP, looking back, what was one of the first victories you can think of as you transitioned into the real estate? I mean, you mentioned the first 28 unit deal. Was that kind of something that solidified the fact, like, yes, we can really do this as a viable full-time path forward? Or
that was definitely one of the first victories. Absolutely. I think the next thing was the closing of a 278 unit portfolio in a suburb of Cleveland in 2020. That was for us a monumental achievement, not only because we were in the midst of COVID, right? And nobody knew what was going on. Money was tight. We were trying to raise equity from like real big boy groups. And we were at the time, how many units did we have? We had, I think, 3 properties. We had a very, very small portfolio, like 100 or so units in total. And, some of the weird nonsense comments that you'd hear from the people in the ivory towers, like, you're going to double your unit count, as if like that means anything. We also self-managed. We were managing all our properties. And back to that point about doubling, like, you're going to double your unit count under management. Like, that's not the problem. That's actually an opportunity, because you have people that work for you at that scale, that, professional people on the team. So being able to close that, I mean, that deal took literally, I think it was 1 day shy of 1 year from when we found the deal to we were able to close it. And that was like, empty, looking under the couch cushions, emptying all the bank accounts to get everything that we needed over to the finish line so that we can acquire our first deal. Because once you get a deal of that size done, it makes it so much easier. At least that was my thinking at the time. It makes it that much easier for future deals, right? Because, you can kind of it anchors your size, your scale to the professionals that are out there as you're trying to work with banks or lenders or equity groups and things like that. So that was probably the next biggest success or achievement, I would say.
Great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So JP, in your new role, in your kind of new real estate stuff that you're doing, that's large multifamily syndications and whatnot, is there a funny story you can share? Yeah,
there is. So this is a bit of a story. I love telling the story. It blends into origin story a little bit, and also a little bit about fate, if I can go there. Right. So it's pretty cool. So allow me. So basically, in 2019, I went to a mastermind event in Sundance, Utah. Never been to Utah before. Never been to Sundance. Amazing place. It was about 300 people that were supposed to be there. And this wasn't a real estate related event. It was just like, hey, let's bring some more people together and you network and whatever else. So I get there the first night. I got there in the evening, and they had like a large social gathering. They had tables set out, and you got your food on a tray. And the story I kind of tell is I felt like I was in middle school all over again. I moved a lot as a kid. So I was always the new kid. So I had my lunch tray. I'm looking around. I didn't know where to sit. It was a little awkward. And then all the way in the back of the room, at least I remember, there was an old guy sitting by himself. Now I say old because he had white hair, white beard, and he looked like he could be Santa Claus. So I thought to myself, let me go sit next to the old guy. Maybe I'll go learn something. That was my thought process at the time. So I walk over, I introduce myself. Hi, I'm JP. Hi, I'm Howard. Nice to meet you. Shake hands. You might sit down. And I learned a lot about this gentleman. I learned that he had just unfortunately lost his wife to Alzheimer's and dementia about 6 months prior to that. And it's really an awful way to watch someone, kind of disappear in front of you, right? So that's one part. I learned that he was a very successful serial entrepreneur. He was very well connected into the Seattle technology space back in the 90s. And he had this interesting skill set around using language in business, right? And so he went on to tell me a story of you gentlemen familiar with Howard Schultz?
Yeah, peanuts.
Starbucks, yeah.
Founder of Starbucks.
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah.
So Howard went on to tell me a story of when that Howard was raising money for Starbucks back in the day. And the bit of advice that he told me, and this is the summary of the story, was basically, Howard, your business is not about selling an expensive cup of coffee. It's about the culture of coffee. And, culture is very, very big with Howard Schultz. And if you think about it, it's one of the reasons why, the team, the baristas, when you're ordering a coffee, even if you go in and you say, hey, I want a large cup of coffee, they're going to call it a venti or a macchiato, or I don't go to Starbucks very often, but, they call it their name, right, in their system there.
Yeah.
So when Howard got into multifamily, he said to himself, I don't think he did it like this, like, Howard, what do I do like that? But he said, how do I break down this stereotypical landlord-tenant combative dynamic that happens in the world today, whereby if you're the landlord, you sort of don't really care who pays the rent as long as they just kind of pay the rent, right? Or who lives there, I should say. And if you're the tenant, you're like, look, what do you want from me? Like, I just pay rent, leave me alone. And so what he thought up was, why don't I create this paradigm, the system where we would, or ethic, as he called it, where we would invite people to become members of the community, almost like a country club, right? But this isn't for luxury housing. This is for like workforce housing, right? Blue collar jobs. And so he created this world where people were called members. They weren't called tenants or renters. They didn't live in a unit or an apartment. They lived in a home, almost dignifying things, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't pay rent. They paid a membership fee. They didn't sign a lease. They signed a membership agreement. They work with a community mayor, not a property manager. And their main job was to love on the members of the community. They work with a membership coordinator, not a leasing agent. And he told me one of the last decisions a prospective member would make before moving in was what color they wanted the walls painted. He said, look, as an operator, I have to turn the units, right? I'm going to paint the walls anyway. But it occurred to me, why not let the person that's going to live inside that home choose the color of the paint on the walls? And the real kicker for that is you're giving them a sense of pride and ownership. And pride of ownership is huge because you want people to care where they live because they'll take better care of it. And so, with all these things to say, Howard was sharing with me that his properties were, the super high occupancy, waiting lists. They were the leaders in rent in the market there where we operated. And all of these things, they just made a lot of sense to me. Like I was texting my business partner, Matt, like, oh my God, I met this guy, he's sharing all these nuggets with me and we became friends. And so the funny story punchline here is at the end of these 3 days, I said to Howard, how the heck is it I find the one guy out of 300 people? And you're literally the first person I walked up to. I said, clearly God and the universe have put us together, have conspired to put us together. And so we ended up working out an arrangement with Howard where we hired him as a strategic advisor for us to help us build this spiritual successor to what he did 20 years ago. And we spent some time in my home outside of Atlanta here. We spent about 3 days with my partner, Matt. We built out our core values. We built out what our big, hairy, audacious goal is. And so the principles of what would become Significant Lifestyle Communities, my company. And that was in the end of 2019. The following year, we went on to acquire our Shaker property. So that was, a truly profound, serendipitous meeting. Prior to getting to that point, you kind of envision and visualize meeting those people that will help you along your career. And Howard has been a phenomenal connection and friend and mentor to us and me. So super, super, super thankful for having met him.
Wow, that's a very cool story. And again, what are the odds? Like you said, 300 people and you two just happen to sit next to each other.
As I've gotten older, this stuff just I go with the clues, right? Somebody calls me out of the blue, I go with it, right? Whatever. So it's fun actually to do it that way.
Yeah. Is it about 1 in 300? Is that the odds? I don't.
Yeah. Well, one in 300 would be the odds. Yes. Yeah. But the first person I walk up to, wouldn't it be like 300 times 300? I don't know what the.
Yeah. Yep.
Something like that.
Excellent. Well, JP, where are you today in your journey as you've acquired several units, portfolios, and everything? Kind of where are you today, and where are your vision for the future?
Yeah. So thank you. Right now we've reached a lifetime unit count of 700 units. We've done about $60 million worth of transactions, which looking back from the beginning is just mind blowing for us. Our goal is to acquire 4 properties a year. And my biggest focus right now for the team is really realizing that I've got a great opportunity to go back and, as I mentioned earlier, help my my tech sales brothers and sisters. So I'm in the process of finishing up a book that is specifically designed or targeted to kind of tell the story and help other tech professionals learn how to passively invest in multifamily apartments. I feel like it's an underserved market there, and I feel like who's better suited to tell that story than someone like me, the guy that's been in the trenches, and been really excited about doing that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in a way, that's definitely a good lead into the next question, which is just along the lines of helping others. You certainly, you certainly can help a lot of your tech brethren, like as you said, learn about the concept of passive investing and building wealth for the future, et cetera. But is there anything else you want to mention that you do personally or perhaps through your company around the idea of giving back to help others?
Yeah. So, it's sort of ingrained. One of the reasons why I think I resonated so well with Howard's messaging is this idea that he likes to say this, the power of right? It doesn't have to you don't have to provide these sort of services, provide people with dignity and respect service, customer service. That's not exclusively reserved for luxury housing, right? Like you can give that to regular people, everybody, right? There's the power of there. And what's been so profound for us was that our clients, because we do, again, workforce housing, like they're not used to being treated the way that we treat people. And it is so abundantly clear and apparent when you like secret shop our properties versus the comps in our marketplace. It's one of the things I do. I'm always secret shopping. I'm always going there and pretending I'm a renter, and just seeing how you're treated. It's just like this taste. Sometimes not all the properties are like this, but I'd say a lot. I can count on one hand how many times I've been asked what my first name is. The industry has become so transactional with things. It's hi, welcome. What are you looking for? How many rooms? How many bedrooms? When can you move in? And there's no rapport building. And so we train our team to build rapport, ask questions. Where are you from? What brings you to the area? Do you have a family? Because people ultimately want a sense of belonging. And so what's really important to my partner, Matt, and I, we're both into biohacking and personal development, and just being better versions of ourselves. And so our goal, our vision is not only to treat people with dignity and respect, and that's one element of improving their quality of life, but ultimately get to a point where we can start rolling out these health and wellness programs within our communities, and to really make that sort of change for the people that live there. One of our communities in Riverdale, Georgia, for example, our community mayor, Zaid, she is literally like the town mom there. She loves the fact that there's so many little school kids, and the property is right across the street from a middle school and an elementary school. And all she likes to do is attract families that come in there so she could be their kind of, their aunt, their mom, right? And provide that love. And I tell you, seeing that in person, and hearing the stories and seeing the photos of the families that you're touching is nowhere near what I expected or kind of thought about when I got into real estate. For me, it was like, it makes passive income, right? But being able to be an employer, right? Like we're running to the economy here and providing jobs for our team. And our team are taking the love that we're giving to them and sharing it with the community. And hearing the feedback from that has been incredible. And so it really has come full circle for us. And it's really a big pillar or an important aspect of who Significant is, because, we're called Significant because our core value was to provide significance for the people that live in our community, that work at our company. And that's really important. And we're driven to continue to make sure people feel a sense of significance in their lives.
Nice.
Yeah. So important. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah. Your GP. Obviously very, very worthwhile goal. Like I said, it's not always just the profit, right? I mean, you can make a profit, but you can still positively impact people's lives and communities.
Can't fix the world broke.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, GP, what's something you've recently implemented in your business that allows you to scale and grow?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I would say this. I spent a lot of years reading about, maybe not a lot of years, but a few years ago, I was introduced to concepts from Gino Wickman and Traction. There's a Dan Sullivan. There's a ton of other business writers that talk about the sort of best practices of running your business. And I had the wonderful fortune of being introduced to Don Wenner at DLP I guess about a year ago or so. Got an opportunity to be invited to one of their events, I think last summertime, and then ultimately invited to apply to their elite program, which we were invited into. And Dom put together this great book where he's taken all of these elements from these great authors, these great minds, and put it into a concise system that takes all the elements of kind of running your enterprise operating system together. And I guess being able to use that for our team. So we have this structure where we're able to run meetings very efficiently. We define our quarterly goals very efficiently, or wildly important goals for our teams very efficiently. And it creates accountability, and it creates this ability to track things too. Like, hey, we have a to-do after a meeting. Oh, okay, Bob's going to send me this document. You put it in their tools there, and you can track it and measure it. And that's important. I mean, being able to do more deals and get more busy is awesome, but you need systems and processes in place to help with that. So I would say having access to the ES tools as being a member of the group there has been fantastic. And even if you're not in a position to tap into those tools, I highly encourage checking out those books and starting, maybe you hire them, right? Bring them on as a consultant and starting incorporating those things, because they do work. They do have the ability of moving the needle. And if nothing else, it just gives you better clarity on how you're trying to operate your business. And that's too.
Yeah.
Yep. That's great.
I forget who said it, but there's an expression, what gets measured gets improved.
Bingo.
Yep. Very nice. So JP, what advice would you share with somebody who's considering making a path change? You touched on it a little bit earlier, but just can you recap that for our listeners?
Yeah, I think I would say it's a kind of few handful of things that all touch upon each other. One is just acknowledging, at least for me, that there are these seasons in your life. And, I think gone are the days where you had a job or a career for the same company for 30, 40 years. I think a lot of us realize that, but it's also, I think, an important reminder for probably the generation that's listening to the show here, that that's not the way the world kind of works anymore. At least for me, kind of getting ahead, I made a lot of job changes. I never thought about changing careers or industries, but if you sort of think you're reaching the end of your season there, then maybe there's a path or a plan for you to kind of think about, okay, how do I incorporate this change? How do I kind of change paths here? And obviously involve your spouse, because it's a big life decision, but it's possible. I don't know what the number is. I would say lots of people do it. And it is empowering. And I think you can take what you've learned in one industry and apply that somewhere else. And that can give you advantages that you might not have, that people that are already in that industry might not already have. So I think those are all pros. If you can kind of wrap your mind around that identity shift, you definitely can do it.
Nice.
Great. Yeah. Well, excellent, JP. What's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you, learn more about what you have going on, and also find out more about your book and your podcast?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say check out my website. It's jpalbano.com, and there will be links to get all the things we talked about in the show, the podcast, getting on the waiting list for the book. But that's JP, letters, and then Albano is ALBANO, no relation to Captain Lou. If you're a wrestling fan back in the 80s. If you are a fan, then he's my dad, right? But jpalbano.com is the best place to go.
Excellent, JP. Yeah. Well,
maybe thinking about it's the singer also. What's her name? Cyndi Lauper, yeah.
She's my mom.
That's right. Tight-knit family.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, JP, we really want to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show today. Really enjoyed the conversation and want to wish you continued success.
From your lips to God's ears, guys, this was great. I really enjoyed reconnecting with you the other day, and thanks for having me on the show. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. We appreciate you, JP, for joining us. So thank you. We also want to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great shows and more great content like our show today with JP Albano. And also we want to remind everybody out there, a couple important things that Park Capital Partners has going on. First, we have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund, which is a 506c fund available today to accredited investors. We also have the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is a 501(c) nonprofit that Bill and I created. And the way that works quickly is that, first of all, Bill and I believe so strongly that we want to make sure all the money donated goes to do its best work, which is to help others. So we fund the operations of the foundation from our company. And then we also donate personally. We donate corporately to the foundation. And then finally, when investors invest with us in one of our projects, we make a donation to honor that investor to a pre-selected list of 15 different charities. So reach out, say hello. Please, we're happy to talk to anybody anytime. ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com. ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com. And I'd love to talk with you. And again, remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. we recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining us.